At least 9 people were killed and 29 injured in a Russian ballistic missile strike on Ukraine's southern city of Kryvyi Rih on 12th of June. Now, not only is Kryvyi Rih Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, but it was the deadliest Russian attack on Ukraine in weeks. A day earlier, Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Russia had destroyed half of his country's electricity generating capacity since it began pummelling its energy facilities in late March. Amidst this doom and gloom, some much-needed good news came from Puglia in southern Italy, where G7 leaders agreed on a new $50 billion loan for war-ravaged Ukraine using profits from frozen Russian assets. It's definitely a shot in the arm for Ukraine, but will it be enough in countering Russia? Our next report brings you the details.
In what is being described as a historic and potentially game-changing step, the G7 leaders agreed on the 13th of June to use frozen Russian assets to raise $50 billion for Ukraine to help it fight the invading Russian forces.
It is a strong signal that we are sending to Ukraine, that we will support Ukraine in its fight for freedom for as long as it takes. It is also a strong signal to Putin that Putin cannot outlast us. You should keep in mind that there's a European support of 50 billion euros, there's the American support of $60 billion, and now comes on top a G7 package of $50 billion. And the message is also that it's not the European taxpayers that are paying for the damage that Putin is causing with his war of aggression, but it is Putin. Because it is the windfall profits from the immobilized assets in Europe that are serving this 50 billion loan for Ukraine.
Also at the G7 summit, pledging long-term support for Ukraine in its war with Russia, the US President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a 10-year bilateral security deal, which Kiev hailed as historic. Following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, some $325 billion worth of assets were frozen by the G7, alongside the European Union. That pot of assets is generating about $3 billion a year in interest. Under the G7 plan, that $3 billion sum will be used to pay off the annual interest on the $50 billion loan for the Ukrainians, taken out on the international markets. The money, though, is not likely to arrive before the end of the year, which means it will have little impact on the current course of the war. But it is being viewed as a long-term solution for Ukraine's war effort and revival of its economy. A day after the G7 agreement, Russian President Vladimir Putin denounced the move as theft and vowed that it would not go unpunished.
The countries of the West have frozen now a part of Russian assets and foreign currency reserves. Now they are thinking about any sort of legal grounds allowing them to finally appropriate them. Despite all the chicanery, theft will certainly remain theft, and it will not go unpunished.
Additionally, on the eve of a peace conference in Switzerland, where Russia has not been invited, Putin laid out a series of conditions for ceasefire and for entering peace talks.
The conditions are very simple. Ukrainian troops must be completely withdrawn from the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. And I draw your attention from the entire territory of these regions, within the administrative borders that existed at the time of their entry into Ukraine. As soon as Kyiv declares that it is ready for such a decision and begins the actual withdrawal of troops from these regions, as well as officially notifies that they abandon plans to join NATO, an order to ceasefire and begin negotiations will immediately follow from our side, literally at the same minute.
On the other hand, Ukraine urgently needs more weapons, primarily air defense systems, to blunt Russia's missile and drone attacks on its cities and power stations, as well as long-awaited F-16 fighter jets. Power disruptions have become increasingly common since Russia began pummelling Ukraine's energy systems in late March, cutting out half of its generating capacity. Consequently, streets are frequently plunged into darkness. The hum of private generators can be heard again, and people are seen carrying flashlights to get around.
For cooking, we also had to adjust and purchase a small gas camping stove to heat stuff up. This is common. Many Kyiv residents, many Ukrainians deal with shortages in this way. I think our situation is not the worst, but with the baby, it seriously complicates our reality.
Judging by Russia's belligerence, the loan is unlikely to force a Russian U-turn on its war in Ukraine. But the West's decision to punish Russia in this manner surely sends a strong message.